Imagine this: a king, deep in prayer, surrounded by his loyal court. Suddenly, two seemingly devout monks step forward from the crowd. They approach him, offer a respectful kiss on his shoulder, a gesture of fealty, perhaps, and then, in a blink, bury daggers deep into his ribs. No one sees it coming. No one can possibly stop it. And here's the kicker: the killers don't run. They stand there, smiling, defiant, until the guards finally cut them down. Meanwhile, miles away, nestled high in the mountains of Persia, an old man hears the news, a slight nod of satisfaction, and quietly closes his book. Another message has been sent. It's a chilling reminder that no throne is high enough, no wall thick enough, no name famous enough to truly escape the daggers of the Hashashin. Pretty terrifying, right? Let's rewind to 1090. The Muslim world is, to put it mildly, a fractured mess. The mighty Sunni Seljuk Turks hold Baghdad, but their grip is slipping, fraying at the edges. From the ancient lands of Egypt, the Shia Fatimids are pushing back hard, carving out their own sphere of influence. Cut right in the middle, a third, quieter voice emerges: the Nizari Ismailis. They decide that waiting around for paradise is seriously overrated. They'll build it right here, right now, one corpse at a time, if that's what it takes. Their visionary, or perhaps terrifying, leader is a scholar who's become a warlord, Hasan-i Sabbah. He's part spiritual guru, part shrewd CEO, and let's be honest, definitely part Bond villain. Hasan-i Sabbah wasn't just a religious leader, he was a master strategist. He understood power, and he knew how to seize it. He sets his sights on Alamut, a fortress so incredibly steep and remote that, legend has it, even eagles filed flight plans before attempting to land. This wasn't just a castle, it was to be the nerve center of a new kind of power. From this impenetrable perch, he issues a stark, brutally simple business model: identify and eliminate the right person at the right time, and the entire world reorders itself. It was a strategy born of necessity, a way for a smaller, ideologically driven group to challenge empires. You don't just join the Hashashin. Oh no, you get invited. It's an exclusive, deadly club. Scouts, sharp-eyed and discerning, would discreetly watch boys in village mosques. They weren't looking for brute strength, but for quick learners, for those nimble climbers who could scale treacherous paths, for kids who possessed that rare, invaluable skill they could keep a secret. This wasn't about raw muscle. It was about intellect, discipline, and absolute discretion. If a boy passed the initial scrutiny, he'd then face a series of loyalty tests. Sometimes these could span years, an agonizing, slow burn of proving himself worthy. Only then, if he emerged from this crucible of trust and dedication, would he become a fidoi, a term that chillingly translates to one who sacrifices himself. These weren't just soldiers, they were living weapons. Their curriculum was intense, running 6 days a week, covering everything from mastering multiple languages for infiltration to the nuanced art of impersonation. They learned the dark craft of poisons, the silent efficiency of knife work, and perhaps most crucially, the art of looking utterly harmless. Graduation day for a fidei was, to say the least, dramatic. It often involved a fake kidnapping, a staged rescue, and a meticulously scripted death. The initiate would be told, with profound psychological impact, that he had already died. The man who walked out of that ritual was no longer himself. He was a ghost with a license to kill, a blank slate, utterly devoted, and free from the fear of earthly consequences. Can you imagine the psychological conditioning? It's potent stuff. The Hashashin never bothered with armies. Why would they? They were far more interested in selling nightmares. Each meticulously planned killing wasn't just an act of violence. It was a press release written in blood, a terrifying public announcement. Targets weren't chosen arbitrarily. They were selected for their profound symbolic value. A vizier who dared to raise taxes too high, a firebrand cleric who preached hate against their sect, a Crusader prince who hogged the limelight and threatened their territories. These were prime candidates. The assassinations were theatrical, designed for maximum impact. Crowds would gather, perhaps for Friday prayers or a public festival, completely unaware of the horror about to unfold. Then, in a flash, the dagger would gleam and the victim would fall, often with almost cinematic timing. The message was clear, chilling, and undeniable. We decide when you breathe. How do rulers respond to that kind of terror? Precisely how anyone would. They hire more guards, they sleep in different rooms every night, they second-guess every shadow. The Hashashin, meanwhile, just smiled. They knew paranoia was infinitely cheaper and far more effective than fielding entire siege engines. It was psychological warfare at its absolute finest. Let's talk about some of their greatest hits, shall we? 1092, Nizam al-Mulk, the Grand Vizier of the mighty Seljuk Empire, was arguably the most powerful man in the Muslim world, the very pillar of the state. He's riding peacefully in his litter, an unassuming figure dressed in dervish robes approaches, and then, in a brutal instant, pulls a knife and stabs him 4 times. The killer, a Fedoi, calmly waits to be killed himself. The vizier dies on the spot. The ripple effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Seljuk state, so dependent on Nizam al-Mulk's administrative genius, wobbled precariously. Taxes froze, roads emptied as trade halted, and bureaucrats, terrified of being next, shredded paperwork. It wasn't just a killing, it was a decapitation of the state. 1174. Even the legendary Saladin wasn't immune. The Syrian branch of the Hashashin tried for him, not once, but twice. In one infamous attempt, 2 Fides infiltrated his camp, disguised as Turkish soldiers. They got terrifyingly close, missing the Sultan by mere inches but wounding his uncle. Saladin, a man of immense courage, reportedly spent the next night sleeping in a tree, a testament to the sheer terror the Hashashin inspired. Think about that, a legendary warrior, reduced to sleeping in a tree for safety. 1192. Then there's Conrad of Montferrat, King of Jerusalem, a key figure in the Third Crusade. He's strolling home after a rather pleasant dinner. 2 monks greet him seemingly pious, but in reality, Hashashin in perfectly crafted costume. Seconds later, he's dead, and the entire Third Crusade loses its momentum. Its leadership fractured. 3 cuts, 3 continents changed, and history rewritten. That's not just assassination. That's an incredible return on investment for a small, dedicated group. Now, about that name, Hashashin. When Western travelers encountered this terrifying new force, they heard the name and immediately made an assumption. Hashish must be involved, right? Marco Polo, bless his adventurous heart, was never one to let mere facts ruin a perfectly good story. He famously claimed that Hasan-i Sabbah drugged his recruits with pot, showed them a fake paradise filled with lush gardens and beautiful houris, then sent them out expecting the same eternal reward in death. It's a compelling narrative, isn't it? But modern historians, with a much clearer view, call absolute nonsense. There's not a single Nizari text that mentions drug use. In fact, the nearest vineyard was a day's walk, suggesting a culture far more inclined to wine than hashish. Yet, the myth sticks. Why? Because it's tidy, isn't it? Stoned, fanatical killers are somehow easier to swallow, easier to dismiss, than disciplined zealots who read theology for fun and are absolutely convinced of their divine mission. The reality is far scarier. These were sober, highly literate, and utterly convinced individuals who believed God wanted that particular guy dead. It's a chilling distinction. By the year 1200, this extraordinary order held sway over about 50 castles, stretching from the rugged mountains of Syria all the way across Persia. They weren't just isolated fortresses. They were vibrant, self-sufficient communities. They minted their own coins, ran extensive libraries filled with invaluable manuscripts, and maintained correspondence with leading mathematicians and scholars in places as far-flung as Cordoba. Outsiders, understandably, pictured a death cult. But insiders? They saw it as a university with knives, a sophisticated intellectual and spiritual hub that just happened to employ deadly precision. Their taxes were surprisingly low, a testament to their unique economic model. Protection money from nervous neighbors, eager to avoid becoming targets, did the job quite nicely. When the terrifying Mongol hordes arrived in the 1220s, sweeping across Asia with unstoppable force, the Hashashin were virtually the only state that didn't flinch. They weren't afraid to engage in diplomacy, sending ambassadors, gifting horses, and strategically buying time. For a while it worked. They navigated the storm, a testament to their political acumen. Until, of course, it didn't. The year is 1253. Hleg Khan, grandson of the fearsome Genghis Khan, crosses the Oxus River. He's not alone. He brings with him an army of siege engineers fresh from catapulting entire Chinese cities into rubble. This wasn't just another invading force. This was an extinction-level event. Letters arrive at Alamut, terse and to the point. Submit. Keep your faith. Pay tribute. Hasan-i Sabbah's grandson, Ruq-ad-Din Kursha, the current Grand Master, stalls. He believes winter will slow the Mongols, just as it slows everyone else. A fatal miscalculation. The Mongols were relentless, utterly determined. Their engineers, masters of their craft, built massive ramps straight up the sheer cliffs of Alamut. They hauled colossal mangonels into position, and in a final, brutal irony, they burned the priceless libraries of Alamut for kindling. In November 1256, the legendary, impenetrable Alamut falls. Some defenders, desperate, are hurled from the ramparts. Others are buried alive under the very manuscripts they once memorized, their fortress becoming their sarcophagus. It was a devastating end to an extraordinary chapter. A few strongholds in Syria managed to hold out for a little longer under a renegade commander, but the tide had definitively turned. By 1275, the last castle was reduced to rubble, its stones scattered, the order effectively broken and scattered to the winds. The daggers, once so feared, disappeared from the hands of the living. But the legend? That absolutely did not. If you're fascinated by how fear can be a weapon sharper than any steel, if you want to understand how a small group can reshape history, then do us a favor. Share this incredible story with a friend who thinks Game of Thrones invented plot twists. Hit that like button, it's the only safe way to stab the algorithm. Trust us. And if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. History is absolutely full of people you really hope stayed fictional. The Hashashin outlived their castles, their fortresses crumbling into dust, by becoming something far more enduring. Adjectives. The word assassin enters English, French, Italian, virtually any language that needs a short, sharp, scary word for a professional killer. Renaissance princes, captivated by their ruthless efficiency, studied their tactics. Machiavelli, the master of political pragmatism, practically copied their homework. Centuries later, a brilliant developer at Ubisoft in Montreal reimagines them as parkour enthusiasts in white hoodies, and an entirely new generation learns the name, fascinated by their mystique. But the real living heirs? They are the Nizari Ismailis today, a vibrant community 15 million strong, led by the Aga Khan. And what are they doing now? Building schools and hospitals, promoting peace and knowledge, instead of murder holes and daggers. Same bloodline, a vastly different, and arguably much better, business plan. It's a remarkable transformation, isn't it? 2 centuries, a handful of strategically placed castles, a few hundred true believers, utterly dedicated to their cause. That's all it took to make kings tremble, to destabilize empires, and to carve out a unique, terrifying niche in history. The Hashashin proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that power isn't always about the biggest army or the largest treasury. Sometimes it's the thinnest blade, placed precisely at the exact right moment. They wrote there are some in other people's blood, then vanished, leaving behind only chilling footnotes that, if you read them wrong, still cut deep. Their rise was an act of audacious, almost unbelievable daring. Their fall, perhaps an inevitability. But in between, they rewrote the rules of politics, one corpse at a time, leaving a legacy that continues to intrigue and terrify us even today.